Hi, and welcome to episode 5 of my Pokemon Scarlet Surprise Trade Crochet Badge Quest here on the I've Pet That Pokemon channel. Throughout this challenge, I'm surprise trading a Pokemon before each gym, Titan and Team Starbase and crocheting the results. So far we've taken down 2 gyms, Brassius and Katie, Clorf the Stony Cliff Titan, and last episode we defeated Giacomo's Team Starbase with our newest member, Azumarill. My niece and nephew made me some amazing fan art after the last video, and I know they'll be watching, so hi. I'll kick off today's video where we left off. I caught this Nomel outside Giacomo's Starbase, gave it a little name change, and began the next surprise trade. Nomel is sent away and replaced with one of my all-timers, the Grass Dragon Pokemon, Applin. I adore this line of Pokemon, so allow me to take you on a story with this episode. Way back when the Pokemon for Generation 8 were leaking, I caught a glimpse of Flapple and fell in love. Then I saw Appletun and it became one of my favourite Pokemon. I ran a Tumblr blog based around Appletun. He has been my phone lock screen for about 5 years now, and so I had to use one on my team when Sword and Shield were released. This is Cinnamon from my original Shield team. This Pokemon is so apt for me, as I was also an avid baker back in the day. I would bake experimental things and even made a short film at university about an erotic cake baker. I applied for Bake Off back then, but I think something about my distasteful cakes put them off. The past few years for me was mostly filled with baking cakes rather than pies, and I would often make dairy-free bakes for someone I used to know. I haven't really baked much since then, until today. Now, I do have the choice of evolution for this Applin though, so let's go through and take a look at our options. As it is, Applin is not defeating any gyms, titans or bases. It has very low stats and can't learn any moves outside of its starting set of Withdraw and Astonish by level up. It would need to evolve in order to have a fighting chance. Our 3 choices are Flapple, Appletun and Applin. Applin is immediately out. The syrupy apple needed to get this evolution is only found in Kitakami, and then to further evolve to Hydrapple, I'd have to defeat Drayton in the Indigo Disc. I could take the trip out, but it seems like a huge side quest for this portion of the game. Fear not though, if you were hoping to see a Crochet Hydrapple in this video, then you're in luck. This year, after falling in love with its new evolution, I crocheted a Hydrapple where each of the 7 serpents can be placed inside of its apple, either facing in or out. This was an experimental piece just for me, after I spent a while shiny hunting an Applin for this evolutionary branch. So now our options are Flapple or Appletun. It would feel wrong not to go with Appletun at this point. I'll jump at the chance to crochet one of my all-time favourites. So sorry Flapple, I'll get to you and Applin another time. I read that the tart and sweet apples to evolve Applin can be bought in the Delibird Presents stores, so I raced to the nearest one to find out that I need at least 3 badges for those items to appear. My only other option was to randomly find one in Tag Tree Thicket. This would take me past another Team Starbase and Titan, so I tried to avoid these as much as I could. Eventually making it to Tag Tree, or Lag Tree as I've seen it called, I went on an apple hunt. I did promise myself that the first apple I find, tart or sweet, would be the evolution I went with, but I changed my mind when it meant that I'd be crocheting Flapple. Nothing against Flapple, it just looks much more difficult to crochet. After a lengthy search, I found my sweet apple and I could evolve this Applin into the best apple pie boy Appletun, but before we reach that point, I need to crochet this momentary team member. Applin is going to be very simple, but let's break down the design anyway. Obviously the apple is apple shaped, but then we have the 3 colour changes. The top is a light red that ends in a circular pattern, not unlike Azumarill's waves. Then the bottom of the apple ends in a brown base with spikes. I should be able to do this all in one go. The eyes are long teardrop shapes, and he has a short 2-toned tail at the back, with 2 small hairs sticking out of it. Most people know that Applin is the worm inside the apple, but I remember seeing it in leaks for the first time. He's so cute, and I'm glad new Pokemon Snap allowed us to have a look inside too. I don't think I'll crochet the worm body, but it's definitely something that I might look at in the future. So colours. I'll use 2 shades of red for the apple, with this light brown for the base. The eyes are a very light green, and the tail will use both this and dark green. I then wasn't sure if I'd use black or brown yarn for the tail hairs, or if I'd make them in yarn at all. Starting at the top of the apple, I make a basic circle, but make sure it can be depressed as the top of an apple would. Then I work down and make the semicircles on the front loops only. Once these are complete, I can then work the darker red into the back loops and continue crafting the apple's shape. I sew the semicircles down after I have enough rows to do so. Once I feel like I've reached a suitable height, I switch to the light brown and begin working out the base. I use spike stitches to create the spiked effect that Applin has. I stuff with leftovers from Azumarill and polyester filling and finish off the base. I thread the tail of the yarn through the apple and then back down and pull it tight. This gives a dip at the top and bottom. I make the eyes similarly to how I did Azumarill's ears. I crochet rounds until I reach a suitable length and then flatten the tube. I make 2 of these and get them stitched to the apple. I begin working on the final part, the tail. I use the darker green and test out a few things to get the shape I want. Applin's tail is what it uses to move, so it has to have a bend in it to reach the floor from its opening in the apple. Eventually, after trying out a couple of ideas, I went with a straight tail and sewed it down at points to give it that bend. I saw a post online recently about someone frustrated that they feel limited by their current skill set when being creative, and I completely understand that. I don't have any crochet peers and only a few Pokemon friends, so it's rare that I get to chat about these things and work on learning new solutions. Anyway, I make the top of the tail in light green, just several rows ending with a circular top. This gets stitched to the tail and then put on the apple too. Finally, I use yellow felt and black yarn for the eyes. The tail spikes were made out of a pipe cleaner. I still wish I found black ones last episode. This was a very quick project because Applin is done. We can now return to the game and feed him a sweet apple.
Because he's my best friend, he's my pal, he's my homeboy, my rotten soldier, he's my sweet cheese, my good time boy.
I take a look at our options for challenges and decide that the best place to head to would be nearby our last challenge in the oasis city of Cascarafa. The water-type gym will be perfect for Appletun. Kofu's ace Pokemon is level 30 and Appletun learns his signature move Apple Acid at level 28, so I'll aim for that level. Despite evolving, Appletun still has no grass moves, and so it struggles against its first opponent, this fierce Magikarp. Still a good effort considering the 9 level gap. I switch train after this. Not all the Pokemon we face will be as frail as this Magikarp. I make my way into Cascarafa, greeted by a Maril, and I can't help but take a picture with my own Azumarill next to it. I heal up and do some more switch training against wild Pokemon around the city. It's a slow process, and so I figure I should look for some low level trainers I possibly missed in the early game. This goes a lot better for Appletun, and he cleans up the remaining trainers. Still looking for more levels, I head to the Asado Desert for more training. This area is filled with higher leveled Pokemon, who are mostly ground type, perfect for Appletun to prey on. We can montage through this next section. Appletun eventually gets his signature move, Apple Acid, and so it's time to explore Cascarafa proper and take on the gym challenge, but not before we crochet Appletun. Looking at Appletun's design, I felt it was deceptively difficult. The apple it previously lived in now resides on its head. It's halved, and the top semicircular pattern is only slightly present. Appletun's eyes sit underneath the apple, hanging down in a teardrop shape. They can be pulled upwards to reveal the eye itself. Its snout gives the impression of teeth, with the green overbite on top of a yellow bottom jaw. Two small red and green leaves sit on top of its back, in the middle of its pie lattice pattern. These four strips overlap each other to form a small square. The main body is apple-shaped. It changes colour from golden brown to light brown to green to yellow. A short pointy tail is situated at the rear. Appletun's front legs are thinner with 3 toes, whereas the back legs are more rounded. As for colours, brace yourself because this is the most amount of colours I've used on a single project so far. I'll use green for the snout, eyes, tail and limbs. 2 shades of red for the apple hat, one will also be used for the top leaves. A light yellow for the underbelly, a golden yellow for the eyes, and a light green for the other side of the top leaves. Then I'm using these 2 browns for the pie back and lattice. I know the pie is more of a golden brown and the underbelly and middle section are the same colour, but I'm going with what I have and what I think looks best. So I start with the body in the darker tan colour. I make a circle, a really big circle. I keep going with the circle until I think it's a suitable size. I know I made the Azumarill line quite relative to each other in terms of size last time, but Appletun is double the height of Applin, who had already made quite large. Speaking of size, and going back to Sword and Shield pre-release, I thought Appletun would be like a big dinosaur guy. Then it turns out he's 1'4", such a baby. I didn't have a ton of brown yarn and I didn't want to create something so much larger than any of my other crochet Pokemon. Once I have my size set, I continue down to craft the apple shape, similar to what I did with Applin but on a larger scale. I can then switch to the lighter brown to create the short middle section that merges a pie crust to the green body. Switching then to green, I finish the apple shaped body. I didn't want to switch to the light yellow underbelly at this point as I wanted it to be slightly off centre. I stuff the body with Applin scraps and a huge amount of fluff and then close up the gap. Looking at it, I kinda wish I would have ended the darker brown earlier so that the green had more space. I begin on the lattice next. It's two-tone in colour with the different browns. I make a rectangular oval in light brown for the base, making 4 of these before moving on to the darker tops. I craft these ones slightly smaller so you get that egg-washed effect of a pie crust.
Baked on a buttery, crispy crust.
Again, I make 4 and stitch each one to the base. They're looking like Saviardi biscuits. I posted this image to my social media again to see if anyone could guess this video's Pokemon or if they found the clue in the last vid. No one found the clue, but Applin shows up right here among the stars. I had a few incorrect guesses from the lattice image, but I'll put that down to me using different colours than intended. Anyway, moving on to the limbs now, I make the tail first as it's the easiest to get out of the way. I make a short cone and then add some increases on one side to give it a slight curve. Next, I work on the front legs. These were a nightmare. I've never made anything with small toes before. I usually make a foot and then sew toes on separately. I searched online for similar patterns I could take inspiration from, or a certain type of stitch that could provide the same shape. Eventually, I found that by working double crochets into the same stitch and then decreasing them all in one motion, it gave a bubble effect that could work for Appletun's toes. I could then work around and continue with the foot and leg. I gave the leg a slight bend, and once it had my preferred size, I worked in rows to make a flap at the top so that the leg fits to the body more easily. I make 2, altering the other side so that the flap up top is on the opposite side. I pin these to the body to check size and position. I think they look okay for something that gave me so much trouble. For the back feet, I make them slightly wider. I wasn't sure how to make a much chunkier leg in the same pattern, so I opted for doing them separately this time. I make 2 feet and work on the leg. Because of its chunky nature and the fact that it's bent in most images, I make the legs a basic circle. I work it out so it becomes a half sphere and check it against the feet. This will be stuffed once it's almost attached to the body. Moving on to the head, I started in green at the snout. I make it very similar to how I made my Hydrapple serpents, crafting a snout first before widening out the head and cheeks. I then decrease the stitches and crochet down the neck until I have this turtle head looking shape. It still needs a bottom jaw though, and before I can do that, I need to make the underbelly it will be attached to. So I make a big circle in light yellow, and once I have a suitable size, I compare it to the body. I want the legs to overlap the underbelly, which is why I haven't already sewn them to the body. For the bottom jaw, I use the same colour and make a rectangle just slightly smaller than the head itself. I can then work around that rectangle to add the cheek and teeth shapes. Again, this is something I learned how to do by making my Hydrapple, as they have similar face shapes. I get it pinned to the head and check how it looks before I sew everything I've made to the body. I have to say I really like the way he's currently looking. He's a bit frog-like in the legs, but his face is quite reptilian, which is good. Now it's time for another important feature of Appletun, his apple hat. Similarly to how I've made the back legs, I make the apple in red out of a half sphere. I can then use the wave pattern I've done previously to make the ridges of the apple. Since I work in rounds of 6, meaning each round I crochet is divisible by 6, I can make 6 of these waves around the base. I do 4 in the same red colour before changing to light red for the final 2, which sit above Appletun's snout. I then separate, making 3 semicircles in this light red to be stitched onto the hat, finishing off the apple. Nearly there. I can make the eyes next. I do these the same as I did Applin's eyes, a tube flattened. I remember when Appletun first leaked and everyone assumed these were his ears, and the eyes must be hidden under the apple. I made this image early on before the game's release because I thought it had to be eyes, and I was right.
Vindication!
Once I had the eyelids done, I use a golden yellow to do the eyes themselves, making this kind of tombstone shape. I stitch these together and place them under the hat, which can now all be stitched to the head. Final pieces now. For the leaves on top, I make this leaf shape out of a light green and red, as the leaves have different colours on the front and back. I then use light yellow to make a very small leaf shape to be stitched to the green side. These are all put together and stitched to the body. Appletun is complete. But is he? Appletun hides a secret. A deep dark secret on his underbelly. He has this cute little apple seed mark. I add this to him by making 2 small circles, and Appletun is actually finished this time. So back to the game. Reaching the gym, we find Gym Leader Kofu rush past us, yammering about an auction. Turns out he forgot his sweet Venomat wallet in his haste, so it's up to us to take it to him in the seaside auction town of Porto Marinada. Luckily, in all my training, I have a fly point set to the town, so I can quickly fly over and check out one of the best cities in the game. One of Kofu's assistants prevents me from reaching the big man, as we have no choice but to melt his Pokemon with a blast of acid.
Real acid? My eyes, the goggles do nothing!
We explain the situation to Kofu, and he asks that his gym challenge be that we compete in an auction for some wakame seaweed from the Hoenn region. I don't get a cheap as chips price, but still pass, and Kofu agrees to battling us back in Cascarafa. More Azumarill love here, as I have to get a picture with this Marill mosaic after the auction. We're really on a sightseeing tour here. Back in Cascarafa, we find that our old pal Nemona wants to battle, what with this being our 3rd gym challenge. Our team is now pretty solid, and so we take her down easily with Appletun and Azumarill. We can finally take on Kofu. Appletun kicks off the battle with a Trailblaze. I want to raise our low speed so we can try and move first against the upcoming opponents. A big mistake for 2 main reasons. 1. Kofu's Vaulting Veluza has the flying move Pluck. And 2. Wug Trio has a massive 120 base speed. It's attached to a rock, where is it going, why is it so fast? Anyway, I blast the Veluza with an Apple Acid to finish it off, and Kofu sends out his speedy Wug Trio. It goes for a headbutt and gets a flinch from Appletun straight away. Things aren't looking great, so I decide to heal up. 2 more headbutts later, Appletun finally spits out an apple acid to take down the zippy garden eel. Now it's time for the ace of Kofu's team, the ice fighting type Crobominable. I'd already taken a look at Kofu's team before starting this challenge, and so I can safely say that the crab has no ice moves to hit us with. Kofu terrestrialises Crobominable into the water type, perfect for us to hit with a super effective apple acid. Remember when I said that Trailblaze was a wasted turn because of our low speed compared to Kofu's team? Well, turns out, Appletun can now use that speed boost to outspeed the base 43 speed Crobominable to move first and one-shot him with a critical hit apple acid. A really anticlimactic ending to this battle, but it shows what a great boy Appletun is. Kofu gives us our 3rd gym badge, which allows Pokemon up to level 35 to obey us. Mischievous, we're getting ever closer to you listening to me. This concludes our Appletun episode, so we close off with a brief chat to the League Champion Geeta and head out to the desert to find a Pokemon for our next trade. This Vampy will work great. Thank you so much for watching. I kind of wanted to do a little outro for this one, just to talk about things. You probably noticed the big time gap between the last video and this one. That was pretty much because I was at work a lot. Work was really getting to me, and it didn't leave me a lot of time afterwards or beforehand to get any crochet done, any videos done. I really didn't like working at the place where I was. It was making me super anxious, and I couldn't really switch off when I came home from work. So I did quit this past week. Possibly really stupid idea, because I don't have a backup job. I understand I'm very privileged that I can do that. So in the meantime, while I am looking for other work, I will be focusing on doing more of these videos, so hopefully I can get them out quicker. Also, if you notice that my voice was a bit different in this one, it's because I was talking a lot at work this past week. I'm not usually a big talker, so having to speak a lot to different people at work, it really ground my voice down, so it might sound a little different this time. But I've kept you long enough, so thank you again for watching. Next week might be something different for the channel. It's Safari Week coming up. I do like to shiny hunt, so I will be taking part in that event, and I'll try to make a little video about that. So yeah, thank you. See you next time.